And as such, I'll leave it to Steve, who will inform us what's happening in the painting scene, and also pivot to Paul Gray, who is well skilled in lead. We'll leave it to Steve, and good luck. Steve, go ahead, please.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. So it was my turn to speak, and really, there's not a lot of new going on in the painting world. Although I did just want to briefly, as I'm sure you all know, our favorite local paint vendor, Kelly Moore, uh, went bankrupt, filed for bankruptcy, like literally overnight, closed all their stores within 2 days. Uh, it seemed like it was sudden, but actually it had been coming for quite some time. They had for years been dogged by asbestos lawsuits from they had a drywall product that they sold years ago that had got tied up in lots of asbestos lawsuits that was always sort of draining their capital. And they just never seemed to really recover from that. Uh, they sold the company, I guess, about 10 months ago, and everybody thought that it was going to be a turnaround, but it just turned out to be corporate vultures who came in and picked the bones clean and, and then just literally closed the doors. What we have done, of course, all the other vendors were, we got the email saying how sad they were to see them leave, but actually they were very happy to try to reach out for new business. We have decided to move the majority of our business over to Dunn Edwards Paint. They are still a regional paint manufacturer. They're very big in Southern California. And I have a good rep there who actually had moved over from Kelly Moore some time ago. He kind of saw the writing on the wall, and he's given me great service. So if you need paint, let me know. I'll be sure to connect you with my sales rep to make sure you get good service and good pricing from them. And beyond that, in thinking about a topic for today, we are just completing a project we did through the Fix It Lead program, which we've been working for many years, originally beginning with the Mayor's Office of Housing. They had HUD grant money to do lead hazard remediations in San Francisco, but that closed up quite a few years ago. But this new program, which was started, and I won't steal too much of Paul's thunder here, started about a year and a half ago, and we've come on board with them and done some projects. We just literally finished one up for them. So I thought it would be good to have Paul come in and explain to us what this new lead program is, how it works, and how you might be either able to avail yourself of it, or if you know somebody who might be a potential candidate for the program, give that information to them. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Paul Gray. He's the program manager over at Fix It Lead San Francisco. And everybody give him a warm welcome, please. Take it away, Paul.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Wonderful. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. And thanks, Steve, for inviting me. My name is Paul Gray, and I work for the San Francisco Environment Department as a project monitor for the Fix Lead SF program. This is a multi-agency city program that facilitates lead abatement projects for single-family and small multifamily homes here in the city and county of San Francisco. I admit I'm not too used to doing these projects. I'm reading off some notes, so I'm now covered from all of your faces. So if anyone has a question during my presentation, please just speak right up rather than raising a hand or trying to interrupt. Otherwise, I'm sure there'll be a little time at the end. Patrick, thank you for your enthusiasm that my speech is going to be fun. I don't know that that's true, though. I'd like to start with a little history of how the program came about. Back in 2019, after nearly 20 years of hard-fought litigation, 10 California jurisdictions reached a settlement with the 3 largest paint manufacturers on behalf of the people of the state of California. This landmark case sought to hold these former lead paint manufacturers responsible for promoting lead paint for use in homes despite their knowledge that the product was highly toxic. It provided hundreds of millions of dollars to these municipalities to help lead paint related hazards that poison tens of thousands of children across California each year. This is which to this day continues to be the most significant environmental hazard for children in California and around the country. The settlement gives the cities and counties the flexibility to create more expansive and effective cleanup or educational programs tailored to their needs of the community. In some cases, folks just want to get the word out more than doing actual lead abatement. Here in San Francisco, we're more concerned about conducting projects. So what is lead? Well, it's a metal mined from the earth. It's been used to manufacture paints, bullets, batteries, additive to gasoline, and many other materials. Lead is toxic inside our body, and there is no safe level. So, how do children commonly come into contact with lead? Buildings built before 1979, and especially buildings built before 1950, are strong candidates for having lead paint. And when that paint is damaged and peeling, they can ingest it. It also is created from the dust from wear and tear on windows and doors and from renovation projects. It comes from the contaminated soil in your yard, which was either from damaged exterior paint or homes near busy streets and highways. It came from exhaust from cars. Now, I know it's been outlawed quite a while in cars, but the damage is done already. Lead can be tracked into the home from jobs from adults, such as the construction industry, from recycling industries, gardening in your own yard, or from the automotive industry. Also, hobbies such as fishing, jewelry making, stained glass making, pottery making, all have potential lead involved. Lead could be in the water, in the plumbing in your home if it's old enough, but I just want to be clear, the city's tap water is safe up until your home. Can't guarantee it after that. Other sources of lead can come from folk remedies that you might get at the local corner store. Vintage furniture, cosmetics, soft plastic cables, metal jewelry, imported candies, children's toys, brass, imported hand ceramics. So there are plenty of sources besides lead paint. What is lead poisoning? Well, it's when lead exposure builds up in the body. It's a serious yet preventable medical condition and most common disease affecting children under 6. Once again, there is no safe level of lead in the body. Who is most at risk of exposure? Children, pregnant women, and developing fetuses, and adults in certain occupations. For children, it's coming from contaminated hands and objects going into their mouth. This is normal behavior, but the easiest pathway for lead to enter the body. Unfortunately, the effects of lead poisoning brings a host of learning and behavioral issues, such as decreased IQ, ADHD, behavioral disorders, violence, and aggressive behavior. As I mentioned, there is no safe level of lead in the body, but the reality is we are all a little less intelligent than we probably could be. It's pretty much in every one of us. So don't mean to be doom and gloom, but that is just our reality. Just a little anecdote, after a few years following the removal of lead from gasoline, there was a noticeable increase in the average IQ testing across the country. Moving on from trying to scare you, let's talk about what exists currently to help lead issues. There are federal, state, and local agencies that have codes and regulations governing how to handle lead properly. In the state of California, there's a lead certified professionals who perform lead construction work. These include inspector risk assessors who do the initial and closing of projects. There's certified supervisors and workers. The supervisors are the construction trade workers such as Steve. These folks are the ones doing all the lead abatement. And sadly enough, there's just not enough of them out there. Steve is one of the few that have been doing this for decades. Myself, I'm a project monitor, which is I'm allowed to do a little bit of crossover with the risk assessors. I also can do scopes of work. Then there's another program. The EPA has a renovation, repair, and painting certification, which is basically affects every trade that might work in a home that has lead paint in it. So, plumbers, electricians, everyone should really have their RRP. But it doesn't quite take it to the level that Steve does on his projects. Unfortunately, the further we get away from 1979, the further folks or younger folks are unaware of the lead in their homes and around them. And it will continue to be a problem for many, many decades to come. As Steve mentioned, there used to be an old program here out of the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, but it was HUD funded, and that did end around 2015. Steve's a better source for stories from that program, but one of the major issues that closed it down were the restrictions involved with the funding, and it became not worth continuing. That brings us up to our current program. We are a multi-department collaboration. The San Francisco Department of Public Health is the lead agency, and San Francisco Environment was brought in to help fill in the team. I have a background in the trades and was very excited to be the prospect of helping build a lead abatement program. While we used some of the foundation of the old program that existed, we had more flexibility to create a new program and not being anchored to HUD's funding rules. The main upgrade was our determination to try and conduct more lead abatement work versus interim controls. So the nuance there is interim controls is covering up the existing problem. So lead paint is not an issue if it's covered properly and maintained well. As long as those layers are not exposed in either dust form or chips, it's perfectly fine. Lead abatement work actually removes the lead in different manners or encapsulates it. The technical definition is it'll solve the problem for 20 years or more. So that was our main intent, was to be a little more aggressive and go after more lead abatement versus the interim controls. Now, this is not to say we're going to make any home lead free. It would be quite impossible without gutting the entire place to do that, but we are trying to make them hazard free. My personal goal was to help bridge the gap between the private sector and the government, mostly in just how we think and communicate. So I know most of you are saying to yourselves, a government agency running private projects in private homes with private contractors, well, that must be efficient. Well, it turns out that even though we have a lot of flexibility compared to our old program, we are still the government and there are plenty of rules to follow. We needed to work with many agencies whose codes and rules we overlapped and affected in the undertaking of making this program. But we have come out the other side and are a functioning program. The final piece of the puzzle is we contract with Rebuilding Together San Francisco, is a non-government agency who they help bridge that gap, as I was discussing earlier. So as a city agency, we can't directly pay someone like Steve, so we have to use a third party to make that efficient. Some other challenges we faced. The housing stock in San Francisco is so old, there's just tens of thousands of potential units. So we had to triage and figure out who and what customers we were going after. Our primary concern was going after homes with children under 6 years old present, or with pregnant women. This could include significant home time spent in a home, say a grandparent babysitting, or residential childcare. The next was residential buildings constructed before 1950. This was actually directly in the settlement, but it is based in the fact that the lead levels prior to 1950 were much greater concentration. We also chose to stick with just 3 zip codes to start, 94110, 94112, and 94124, due to the housing stock and the cases of elevated blood lead levels and some other factors. We're also working only in single-family homes and multifamily buildings smaller than 10 units. Our thought was there are quite a few buildings out there that could eat up most of our budget if we tried to, convert a several hundred unit building. So we want to keep it small. In those multifamily units, there really only needs to be one unit that has a child. That would be our entry into the building. And if the property owner does want to renovate the other units, our thinking being that someday a child would be there or could be there, we do have a cost sharing program. We would pay 60%, they would pay 40% for those other units. In the units that do qualify and are just children only, we pay 100% of the project. That being said, we do have a cost cap and also a minimum threshold to get into the program. Both we will adjust as time goes on based on circumstances, main one being material costs have been evolving since the start and the pandemic and for many other reasons. We started off with a pilot program to help us work out the kinks. Took a different cross-section of project types, project homes, tenant owned or tenant occupied, owner occupied, and we're now open for the full program. As I said earlier, we're going for more abatement items in our projects, such as replacing double hung wood windows, stripping or replacing doors, and mitigating other hazards that are present. Since our projects are somewhat intrusive, often affecting all of the rooms, we also help coordinate and pay for temporary relocation of the occupants. This helps the work be more efficient for the supervisors and safer for the customers. A typical project has lots of steps. I'm going to go back to the government element of things. There'll be as many as 3 visits to the home before it could be accepted. First one would probably be myself just going out and seeing if we would meet the minimum threshold. With my guess of what a project scope would be, it will then follow with up to 2 inspections to verify products that are there, the main one being lead, but we also will test for another hazard, which I'm going to not mention at the moment, if I believe it's necessary. Then we'll put together a scope of work, work on that with the property owner, agree to a scope of work. Then we have a supervisor bid walk. So Steve and company or some of the other supervisors that have agreed to work with our city program. And I do want to just applaud Steve and anyone who's willing to work with the city, as much as I hope and I help make this a little more friendly to folks. It's still an undertaking. So thank you, Steve. But we'll do a bid walk after the bids come in. Contractor is picked, connected with the property owner. Contract is made. Once the project is set for or scheduled for the work, we'll conduct a relocation directly with the clients or the property owners that live there. The work gets done, then there's back to the certified state workforce, there's a clearance process. So these projects need to be cleaned down to an incredibly low level. Steve could fill in or tell stories perhaps after, but what the government requires is incredibly difficult and probably will be the cleanest your home has been since it was first constructed. Then once the clearance occurs, the clients are brought back in to a safer, hazard-free home, and we pay the bills in hopefully a more impressive time than other programs.